Hey there, I'm Kriang.Khai from Thailand, and I'm here to share the story of my life. It's like a collection of stories, so bear with me. Back when I was a teenager, I used to help my grandma with her grocery shopping at the wet markets. One day, while we were shopping, I noticed this intriguing talisman displayed beside one of the stalls. It was a small statue with shimmering, brightly colored eyes that caught my attention right away. In a moment of impulsiveness, I decided to take the talisman and quietly slipped it into my school bag while the vendors were occupied. When I brought it home, I couldn't help but examine it closely. The gold-colored talisman looked stunning, so I placed it on the study table in our living room. The next day, things took a strange turn. Out of nowhere, I fell terribly ill with a high fever, feeling utterly drained and weak. As the days passed, my condition worsened, and I had to be rushed to the hospital. But surprisingly, upon reaching the hospital, I miraculously started to feel better. Both my grandma and I were puzzled by this sudden improvement, so we decided to leave without consulting the doctor. When we arrived back home, something bizarre happened. As I stood at the door, an inexplicable energy overwhelmed me, causing me to collapse on my knees. My grandma had to help me to the living room couch, where I dozed off to rest. After about an hour, I woke up and went around the house looking for my grandma. That's when I noticed something eerie near the stairs on the upper level. There was a dark figure with no facial features, bending its head down over the railing, peering at me. Naturally, I got the fright of my life and screamed in terror. I cried and screamed, "Grandma! Grandma! Help! Help!" I felt like my leg was paralyzed, unable to get up. Grandma came running to me, asking what happened. I was speechless, but I could only point my finger at the stairs. She looked at the stairs but found nothing there. She assured me that no one was there, but I peeked at it again. The thing was gone, yet fear overwhelmed me, and I trembled. That was my first ever encounter with something supernatural. From then on, it just keeps coming. The next night, I experienced sleep paralysis. Tossing and turning, I then suddenly saw a horrifying figure with mutilated facial features and fiery eyes lift me up from the bed. It then reached for my neck and started strangling me. I struggled helplessly to break free. I couldn't shout for help, and just when I thought I was losing my breath, the grip suddenly released, and I fell back to my bed. I then woke up in cold sweat, questioning if it was a dream, but it felt too real. I was so scared that I didn't dare to go back to sleep. I sat on my bed, covering my head with a blanket, trying to stay awake until morning. From that point on, I realized I couldn't be alone anymore, and begged my grandma to let me sleep in the same room with her till this day. Mid-year school holiday came, and our class teacher decided to take us camping in the forest. We were all super stoked and excited for the trip. Once we reached the forest, we found a good spot to set up camp for the night. After sorting everything out and having our dinner, we gathered in a circle under a big tree. We began sharing our stories and life experiences one by one. But when it was my turn to speak, something caught my attention up in the tree branches. I saw this seriously creepy-looking shirtless man, no teeth, half of his upper body covered in blood, just hanging there like a monkey would. And he's smiling at me. It freaked me out so bad that I just passed out right there on the ground. I guess everyone was freaked out too, and I swear I could faintly hear screaming and shouting right after. The next morning, when I finally woke up, my teacher came to check on me and asked what had happened. But I was too scared to tell her. I thought no one would believe me, or worse, she'd think I'm crazy and all my classmates wouldn't want to be friends with me. So I decided to keep it to myself. That whole experience again left me seriously spooked, and I didn't want to risk being called the crazy camper or something like that. During another long school holiday at the end of the year, my dad surprised me by bringing me along on his business trip to Vietnam. I was super thrilled because it had been a while since we traveled together, especially after my mom passed away. As soon as we landed at the Vietnam airport, we grabbed a cab and headed straight to the hotel my dad had booked in advance. The moment we reached the hotel entrance, we were both blown away by its beauty. It was an old but famous hotel with stunning architecture and a massive man-made fountain. We wasted no time and quickly checked into our room. The room itself was gorgeous, with a unique design and still in great condition. After dropping off our luggage, we freshened up with a quick shower before calling it a night. It was already 1 a.m., and we were both exhausted from the long day. But then, in the middle of the wee hours, I suddenly woke up to a tapping sound on the wall. I felt this chilling coldness in the room and opened my eyes to see a creepy crawling creature on the wall above us. Oh no, not again, I thought to myself. My mind was racing, trying to figure out what it was. It turned out to be a woman wearing a white cloth with long hair hanging down, covering her face. She was crawling with long, sharp, dark nails on both her hands and feet like Spider-Man would. She smelled horribly putrid, too. She then noticed that I could somehow sense her, and slowly crawled towards my direction. I was terrified and tried to scream for help, but my body wouldn't respond. I felt exactly like the past episode where the sleep paralysis kicked in, and I couldn't move my body around. I then could only move my eyes around the room, desperately trying in any way to wake my dad, who was sleeping next to me. The creature was just a few feet away. After what felt like forever, I managed to so-called break the spell and let out a loud scream. That woke my dad up, and the creature stopped in its tracks, and I felt like it was mocking me. My dad reached out to me, shaking my shoulder, asking if I was okay and what had happened. I just kept crying. As soon as the lights were on, I saw that the creepy woman hastily scurried back up, disappearing right through the wall. My dad tried to calm me down, giving me some water and wiping the tears and sweat from my face. He asked if it was just a bad dream, but I was still trembling and couldn't fully express what I had witnessed. I just pointed at the wall, trying to say that the woman had crawled on it. My dad could sense that something was off, so he immediately packed our stuff and took me down to the hotel lobby, requesting to change to another room. I was protesting heavily and insisted we go back home as soon as possible. He reluctantly gave in. We then looked for another hotel nearby and checked in there. Morning came, we immediately checked out and booked our earliest flight back home. I asked him whether or not he could sense or see anything that night, and he told me he couldn't. But he said he remembered seeing one lady wearing the same matching clothes that I've described checking out from the hotel while we were checking in. That must have been her, I thought out loud. After all that passed, thinking back, I felt guilty that my dad got an earful from his boss and lost a big potential client in the process. Sorry, Dad. A week later, I was on the bus with my grandma after visiting her relatives in another town at night. She dozed off, and I was there beside her, reading my favorite comic book. While reading, I got this weird feeling, like someone was watching me. I glanced out of the window next to me, and man, my heart sank right into my stomach. There was this guy with a horribly injured face, blood still dripping down from his head, and he was staring right at me. It was like my brain went on pause for a few seconds, trying to process what I was seeing. The freaky part was that the bus was moving fast, and there was no way a person could stand or run at the same height as the bus window, let alone keeping up with the speed. It was just impossible. Finally, when my brain started working again, and I acted on instinct, I quickly pulled the curtain shut, closed my eyes, and tried not to look at any windows on the bus. Inside, I was silently praying that whatever that thing was, it wouldn't follow us back home. I didn't want to scare my grandma, so I kept the whole incident to myself. Thankfully, when we reached home, that creepy guy, or whatever it was, didn't follow us. I heaved a sigh of relief and tried to put the whole thing out of my mind. It was just too spooky to dwell on, and I didn't want to think about it anymore. When I was 18, one of my close friends finally got his driving license, and he was super excited to take me for a joyride at night. He showed up at my house with his motorcycle, ready to hit the road. We had a blast riding around, enjoying the cool night breeze. But things took a spooky turn when it was time for him to drop me home. As I was getting off the bike, I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. A woman standing about 5 meters away in the middle of the road, but her feet weren't touching the ground. I was absolutely terrified. In a hushed voice, I told my friend to reverse and take another route. At first, he didn't believe me and thought I was just trying to play a prank on him since he couldn't see anything in front of us. But when he realized I was dead serious, he started trembling and decided to listen to me. We took a different way back home, and ever since that night, my friend has been too scared to come to my house again. Can't blame him, though. Later that month, I asked my friend out for supper. I went to his place to pick him up in my dad's old car. We were making jokes and laughing during the way to the eatery with both the driver's and passenger's windows down. So our music was blasting through the radio, and we were totally getting into it. I started whistling, and my friend couldn't resist singing along. Suddenly, both of us felt like something was brushing against our arms. As I was still busy concentrating on driving, my friend slowly turned and took a look behind. He squealed. Thinking what the fuss was about, I then quickly looked in the back mirror. Turned out that we both saw a large African man with big afro hair leaning forward listening to us whistling and singing. That explains the brushing feeling. We both screamed for our lives. I somehow still managed to carefully drive into a supermarket parking area. Once we came to a stop, we both bolted out of the car immediately. As we went right into a corner, we still felt the adrenaline pumping, and when we finally stopped, we had to catch our breaths. That was when, out of nowhere, the Afro guy appeared right in front of us. "Hey, no more music and whistling?" he asked. Both of us freaked out and ran all the way into the supermarket, alerting bystanders and staffs. We looked back and we saw nothing. He just simply disappeared. Now, you might be wondering why there are cases after cases, and you would be thinking, is it because of the talisman that I stole? I'd like to think so, but as it turns out, the talisman wasn't the source of the supernatural occurrences at all. It was actually my grandma who had been inadvertently summoning these entities all along, and the talisman was merely a distraction from the real source of the haunting. She is also the one to be blamed for my mother's passing. I believe it was due to jealousy that my father and mother shared a very close bond. I felt both angry and sad at the same time, but I guess it's okay now. She suddenly died yesterday from a stroke. Well, as I'm writing all of my experiences now, the spirit of my mother is hovering beside, smiling and watching me. It's also her that has been guiding me through this revelation. She also somewhat comforted me. But before she slowly drifted away forever, she softly reassured me that the curse has been lifted, and that there will be no more occurrences like these that will befall on me again. For now, I can only just hope. I miss you, Mom. Hey friends, thanks for listening. Look forward, subscribe, and click on the notification bell for more future stories. Also, share your thoughts in the comments below. Got any stories to share? Feel free to send us your stories through the email provided in the description. Peace.